Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and today we're going to take a break from Fire Emblem a little bit. Engage is coming out, my channel is going to be flooded with content from that, but I did want to give a little shout out back to Mordor, Depths of Dejenol, and to a comment. One person, KDHLKJHDLK, I believe, unless the L's are capital I's, which doesn't make sense because the rest of the name is lowercase, asked for a map tier list for Dejenol. And who am I to disagree? So let's get to it and see if we can finish it before the queue of Mordor music runs out. Hot take, we probably won't be able to. So Mordor the Depths of Dejenol has 15 maps. They are all perfect 30 by 30 squares. Every map is a dungeon floor. They go in sequential order from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 15. I just have them split across these two rows, not for any particular reason, just because I needed some extra rows in order to fill out the space on the tier list and make it so I don't have a giant white block. I think the game is interesting, I think the game is fun, I think the game definitely can get grindy and a little bit boring to a point, but the question remains, what am I tiering these maps on? Because all of these maps are kind of a mess. All of these maps are grid-based dungeon maps, like the type of maps that you could just draw onto graph paper yourself for like a really old school Dungeons and Dragons type dungeon campaign. I think all these maps have potential. I think that some of them maybe have more potential than others. Some of them maybe have more interesting ideas than others. And some of them are more fair in their layouts, some of them are more tricksy traps in their layouts. Some of them are more memorable because of features on them, some of them are more memorable just because you play them a lot. For instance, the very first floor, I guess this is an example for me to talk about every dungeon map and their different features. The very first floor, it's pretty basic, there's not a ton of traps, there's a rotator in the top right, which can send you into some different rooms that you can't get out of without like teleportation or whatnot, so you have to go back through the rotator. There are a couple of secret doors. There's the Aboleth boss, which is in an anti-magic area and can poison and disease you, and hits hard, and drops items potentially from like floor 2 or 3, I think. There's this chain of rooms I always call the Monster Office Building, because it's just a hallway with square rooms on either side. It's kind of basic, but it gets the point across, and it's supposed to be basic because it's not supposed to kill you yet. This is Mordor the Depths of Dejenol. Everything will kill you, but this map's design is not necessarily to kill you. Not yet. Yeah, I don't know if a tier list is the right format to really do this, but someone asked for a tier list, so I guess I will do it that way. Floor 2. Now you're getting into the point where I don't really like floor 2, to be honest. I spend a lot of time on floor 2, obviously, but like the weird chain of anti-magic rooms over here, the big lake, but none of the lake monsters are really that threatening or that worthy of experience. They don't drop anything interesting. There's also that big lake on floor 1. I think objectively, like floor 1 and floor 2, they're supposed to be more basic, simple maps, but I don't really like them. I think also floor 3 is probably one of the weakest maps in the game. Maybe I'll put it like C tier, I don't know. I have a hard time really giving my opinion on these maps in this sort of format, because I'm just not used to, like, okay, chapter tier lists, you know, is it an interesting chapter in Fire Emblem? You can make some pretty good, you can narrow it down to what makes a good map in Fire Emblem pretty well. An Actual Lizard has done a pretty good, and that's his username, but has done a pretty good video on that. Mecha, I'm sure, has talked about it. Several other Fire Emblem creators have talked about it. I've talked about it a little bit. But you can narrow down pretty well what makes a good or bad map a fun or an engaging or a boring map in Fire Emblem. Whereas for this, it's just like, okay, how do I rate the map? How much it wants to kill you? How boring it is to play through? Well, that's not necessarily the map's fault. I think design-wise, there are definitely elements that I like or dislike about some of these maps, but I don't necessarily think that I can accurately give like a this is clearly better, this is clearly worse, a type of rating, so maybe a tier list isn't the right format. But then again, it was presented to me as make a tier list, so we're doing it. Floor 4, you have the... Okay, so floor 1, pretty basic. Floor 2, you start getting a lot more anti-magic areas. You have the water area, you have a couple more fog rooms. Floor 3, you start getting like the fog hallways with pits in them, separating the map into 2 distinct areas, and this is kind of a third semi-separate area. You have all the weird rotator single tile rooms and whatnot over here. Not much of a maze, but kind of begins to teach you, hey, the game is going to have some maze architecture to it. I think overall, design-wise, I don't hate it. It's hallways and then a lot of side-connected rooms. It's pretty easy to get to where you actually want to go, though, so I think maybe I'm rating these on basic navigation and how it makes use of the space. That should be what I'm rating on. Okay, so let's unrate these maps for a bit and talk about how they use their space. That sounds like a better idea. How do you use your space effectively? I think floor 1, it's a pretty... it's actually pretty good. It's meant to be an easy level, meant to be pretty grindy. You have... There's not really too many points of high interest when you're just going through floor 1. And so most of the map is pretty equally important. The important thing for floor 1 is that you have a lot of different rooms to fight a lot of enemies to grind up really quickly and get a lot of item drops. And as well as having a couple of longer hallways with fewer enemies, so you have some safe spaces in order to get back. And I think floor 1 does that very well. You have, again, the monster office room. You can hit every single room down that hallway and have a fight, but you're not, you know, having to run through a lot of different encounter squares to get to that office hallway. You have the side rooms everywhere you go when you're trying to get to the Aboleth layer. I think the only parts that I'm not really a fan of are this big lake of water with nothing in it, and then kind of leading up here to like that swampy area. But then you do have that kind of sectioned off mini area. I remember kind of planning routes and doing as fast as I can clear room 1 if possible. And you can just barely, if you auto-attack and kill everything, like in 1 round of combat, you can just barely clear the entire map and get back to the start before it starts respawning. If you're really fast, you can actually do it a little faster than that. But that, I think, is pretty good map design for if you want just like an endless grinder. And so I think it's a pretty solid A tier. Is it going to be S tier? Who knows? Yeah, I think floor 2, conversely, doesn't really use its space very well. You have this lake, but there's no real reason to go into the lake. You have the 2 separate stairways. You have the secret room in the DNA, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like, it's a staircase that just takes you back down. It's a teleporter that takes you back down to floor 1, I think, and there's no other way to get back up. Up, down's gonna be confusing here. It takes you back to floor 1, and there's no way to get back to floor 2 from it. It's like a one-way stairway. It's the only one in the game. It's weird. I don't think this map uses its space very well, in all honesty. I especially don't really like the chain of rooms, that little anti-magic area. And I think that there's just so much of this map that I have no real reason to go to. And the game doesn't make me want to go there. Is it a D tier map? I don't know. I think we'll get to the only true D tier later, but it's not a great map. Floor 3, you have some threats, you have some Nastroms, you start facing demons. You have a couple of places of interest where it's mostly because of floor 4, but it splits your interest into wanting to go to the upper path for the goblin lair, wanting to go, just these stairs, which are pretty close, so convenience is nice, and then wanting to go through this stairway, which is entirely separate entrance from 2, in order to get to the layers on 4. That said, I think I'm probably have to rank it at C tier as well, because again, there's not really much reason to go to any of the other rooms. Like, you have this giant, like, swamp, water and quicksand, and the little path between it, which is cool, but there's no reason to really ever go there unless you're deliberately seeking out certain monsters in floor 3. You have this upper area up here. You have a lot of these just random square rooms over here in the top right. There's a lot of places in this map that in isolation could be interesting, but I think with the map as a whole, taking the map as a whole, it doesn't make you want to go over there. I really like floor 4. Maybe I'm crazy for liking floor 4, but I think it's a really well thought out map design. I like that it has 2 clear sections, that you either have the really fast section, where if you just want to either kill floor 4 enemies, you have this other square, or it has the larger section of if you want to go back and forth and hunt the layered monsters. I like that the lower section has you traveling through kind of a maze of rooms in order to get there. I do think it kind of drops the ball in this other section, so maybe it's not true S tier, but restart my music. But I think that as far as map goes, this is one of the most memorable, and it also teaches you to use the quirks of the game. You have this very thick wall. It's deliberately designed. You can't dimension door through this ethereal portal. But if you ethereal portal through the edge of the map, you'll wrap around and find yourself here, into that other section. And so it really rewards careful planning and good use of the map design, and teaches you more about the game design. The layered monsters, there are 2 of them. They're interesting, they're difficult fights, but they're relatively rewarding fights. And also this square room, this square section, isn't to be counted out either. There's a lot of dragons that you can fight here for gold. A lot of different layered monsters, not layered monsters, quested monsters can be found on floor 4. It's just a really well-designed map, and it's a map that I think you want to kind of constantly go through up until the point where you've basically out-leveled it. A map that makes you want to play it. It's solid. Floor 5, you want to go through the Twisted Elf, and then to leave you can teleporter out, which can take you to a random location. There are a couple other points of interest. There's the Poltergeist, which would have been more interesting. I think there's a... was it the one on 3 that drops you down to 5? I think there's a chute on 3 that drops you down to 5 into the Poltergeist layer, or maybe it's a teleporter, maybe it's something on 4. Either way, that's more of a trap room than an actual rewarding room, even though it's a unique monster, or fairly mostly unique monster. There's no real reason to fight it. There's the Cockatrice up here, which a lot of people love for its drops, airds, and some pretty good weapons. Other than that, it's kind of maze-like. It even has this little... Is that the room I'm thinking of? No, that's just a fog maze. I think it's floor 6 that has the other room I'm thinking of. You have all these different kind of office buildings if you want to just run through and kill stuff, but it's not required. I think it doesn't make you want to go through all of it enough to really warrant it being like an A tier map, but I don't think it's bad. I don't think it wastes its space. I think floor 5 is this another A tier or is this another B tier? Points of interest. You have a couple of unique areas. If you'll see in the top right, you might have to really zoom in. There's no real way for me to show you these effectively. If you go to the top right, you'll see all these little pluses, and then the plus, that's just like a rotator, spam room. There's no real threats in it, but it's just kind of interesting that it's there. You have this massive like labyrinth almost of single tile rooms. You have the giant swirl, which is meant to be kind of like a labyrinth, and there's a minotaur in the center. Good thematics. There's the Medusa down in this other room. It flags it really well by giving you a couple rooms of snake servants, and so I think that that's pretty well designed. You have the fog rooms, which have slimes in them. You have a lake, which has a lot of actually high experience rewarding lake monsters. Then you have kind of all this section over here. which is not super relevant. You have the separate side stairs over here, which no one really goes down. These stairs, I think, are more centralized, or at least I don't really go down those stairs. These ones are more centralized. And then you have the Zabrat layer all the way up here. Zabrats can spawn anywhere, but they are layered. They are set to hardcode spawn more often than not. And there's one little tile room up there. It's a very threatening map, but it still manages to be fair. And I think that for being, you know, floor 6, kind of the end of the early game, it's a very fair map. It's a very well done map. It doesn't necessarily execute on all its ideas ideally, but I think it's still really solid. Floor 7, I want to like more. I like the thematics it has, but I think that there's a couple things that just hold it back a little bit. Floor 7, you have 3 major bosses, the Butcher, the Demonist, and the Hooded Thief. Each of them drop thematically appropriate items of a much higher level requirement than you'll generally be at in Floor 7. The Avenger Sword, the Mystic Shield, and I think there's some sort of dagger or boots item that the Hooded Thief drops. They're not necessarily unique to dropping there, I think the Avenger is, but they're much more common there. I think overall it's a really solid map, but I don't think that it doesn't use its space super well. You have a giant lake, which is really good. You have this big square room, which I guess is meant to be like giant pillars or something. It's kind of thematically cool, but then you have this rotator room and this rotator room, which are connected by teleporters and are identical. So I guess if you're blind mapping this, you might be confused as to which one you're in. Then you have this like cluster of rooms over here that, like, how do you even get to them? There's not, I guess if you go through that from 6 to 7, that stairwell, and there's like one extinguished square here, your first experience of an extinguished trap. I just think that there's a lot of dead space that could have been used better. Floor 8, speaking of dead space that could have been used better, I'm not a fan of Floor 8. There's no layered monsters, there's nothing particularly interesting, and it's very threatening. There's a lot of strong monsters, but not really a lot of great drops you can get in here. You have this fog floor maze with rotators and direction squares and little rock tiles in it. It's very threatening. You have the only exit down is not a staircase, but a teleporter series. You have a lot of kind of square rooms, but they're oddly blocked off in ways. So much of this map just kind of feels like they made it and they had an idea of what they wanted it to be, but it never really gets executed on, and you have no real reason to stay on floor 8, because if you're able to survive floor 8, you're pretty much able to survive floor 9, and floor 9 has the vampire on it, which you want to kill all the time for vampire fangs, because they're just the best, like one of the best weapons in the entire game. So centralizing, and so I think floor 8 really needs to lift itself up. There's no real reason to be on floor 8. Floor 9, I'm not going to rank A rank because I don't think it's like super great, but it does have the vampire, which makes you want to stay on it and want to fight in there. I think it's cool how they have these secret rooms cut into the rock. I wish that there was something interesting in them. Like if this was where the vampire was, or if there's another unique layered monster up here in that little secret area, I would love it. That would be like an S tier map design. As it stands, it's cool that it's there, but there's no reason to go there. It's interesting because this map is after the giant portal section, and so the idea is before the portal, it's meant to feel a little bit more mine-like, and then after the portal, it's meant to be, I don't know if it's meant to feel different, but it feels different. The layout is a lot more open, a lot more haphazard, a lot fewer square, like there are still a lot of square rooms, but there aren't quite as many chains of square rooms. I wish they had doubled down on that. As it stands, it just kind of is haphazard though. Like, I'm putting it for B in B tier because of its potential, but it's really haphazard. There are pits and directional squares that don't really do anything. They're more of slight annoyances. The vampire is cool, and that rock room is cool. I wish they would have done more with that. And then you have a lot of random one-off little like water areas. But ultimately, outside of hitting the vampire, there's no real reason to stay on and explore floor 9, which is kind of sad. B tier for potential, but doesn't really execute on it. Floor 10. I'm going to put floor 10 in C tier once again for kind of wasted space. You have the Giant King's lair, and you have a lot of really... that's very thematic. All the attention to detail went here because every single room you progress through has stronger and stronger and stronger giants up until you get to the Giant King himself. It's cool. I like that. Unfortunately, you have this mess right in the middle that you have to travel through, which is just kind of odd and confusing, but not really... doesn't really seem meaningful. It just kind of seems haphazardly, let's throw some directional tiles and some pitfalls and fog in the middle there. They'll figure it out. It's semi-structured, but lacking in structure, and there's a lot of places on this map that if you get randomly teleported to by a teleport trap, you cannot escape unless you have movement spells of your own or fail another teleport trap. I know that the idea is that the dungeon is starting to become a deliberate death trap that's trying to kill you, but that's not the way that I would like it to kill me, you know? I'd like it to kill me in ways that are cruel but fair, and not ways that are, hey, we didn't necessarily plan for this to happen, it's totally random where the teleport trap takes you. If it randomly takes you here, you're screwed. I don't really like that. But because of the care to detail that it gives with like the Giant King's lair and whatnot, I think it is still a C tier map. I don't think it's down to the dregs of like with floor 8. I think I actually like floor 11 a fair bit, and hear me out on this. The mix of land and sea. The massive water, which is very threatening if you you want to dash through, but if you dash through, you're going to hit teleporters, you're going to hit rotators, you're going to get lost at sea, and then you're going to get teleported and split up. It does it really well. My first time traveling through floor 11, I was a little careless, I ran too fast, and I ran straight into a teleporter and everyone got split up and killed. Floor 11 is memorable. Floor 11 also does a really good job of shoving together all of their interesting ground tiles, into one area. You still have one area in the top right here that if you get randomly teleported into it, you're gonna die. You're trapped. But I think that that's more forgivable here because they try to make every area somewhere that you either have to run through or somewhere that you kind of want to get to. Like with the White Dragon layer over here, there's a little bit of, I hesitate to call it truly wasted space over here in the top left. But overall, this is a well done, well designed map that looks messy but isn't. There's a good structure to it. Whereas something like floor 10 looks messy and is, and there's not really a whole lot of semblance of what's going on. I like my maps when you can tell that there's a theme going through them. You know, maybe floor 4 isn't an S tier map. No, I still like floor 4. Floor 12. What do I do with floor 12? Is that even floor 12 or is that floor 13? No, that's floor 12. I'm double checking on this. Yeah, so floor 12 has... You start right here, there's a point of interest here in the Mother of Serpents, or you could start over here, I think. Yeah. If you start over here by trudging through the waters, there's not really any points of interest, but you have a little bit faster way of getting to... No, wait, 13 is over here. What is over here? Floor 12 is one of those maps that it's deliberately confusing, but I think it works better somehow than floor 10, because everything's so threatening, but there's also reasons to go different places. Like, for instance, this little upper section, it's... Okay, that goes to floor 13. That section is cut off from everything else. Why would you want to go there? there's a chance of pariah spawnings over there. You have a lot of these areas which, in my mind, are kind of dead zones, but that's just because if you're hitting through points of interest, you hit up Mother of Serpents, and then you go down here straight to floor 13 for the graveyard. But I think it's still a pretty reasonable map, a pretty decent one. It just kind of doesn't really fill me with all that interest, you know? It's fine. Floor 13 has definitely used its space pretty wisely. There are traps on floor 12 that if you spring them, you get teleported into this rocked out area of 13. It's a massive lake with quicksand with no way out. There are supposed to be dragon turtle spawns. If you fix those, then they will spawn, but if not, then it will, which are exceedingly strong, threatening enemies that are also very valuable to kill. The only way out is through random teleporters. Maybe it's not a random teleporter, but if you get randomly teleported in, or you trigger the trap and fall in, that's a really dangerous time. There's also deliberate sections of the map. This massive side on the left, people call the graveyard. There's a lot of square rooms that are isolated that you can walk completely around, and inside those square rooms there are high-level demons and undead. There are also demons and undead just kind of in general across this whole leftern area. If you go to the right towards the stairs, there's a little bit more of like a confusing block over here. If you get in here, I think you have to take, that's like a teleporter out. It's really hard to see in this tiny resolution. And then you have in the top right a fog rotator maze, which kind of like floor 6, I believe, or 5? Kind of like floor 8 with the fog rotator maze, but this one's big, and it's in a place that is still out of the way, but I still like it. I still kind of like it, and I like it in the sense that this is deliberately a death trap floor, and if you hit random teleporters that get you into those death traps, they're gonna do their best to kill you, but they're gonna do it in a fair way. You can still get out. It's just gonna take a bit of effort. A tier, I really like it. I can't really express why I like it though. As far as that, I want to love floor 14. I think floor 14 is genius. I just think it has problems when it comes to its execution. Because, like, yeah, I think because of lack of potential, it can't be S tier. But there are so few changes you need to do to make this an S tier map. Floor 14, if you can tell, is separated into like 6 or 7 clear sections. You have the central lake and the island in the middle. You have 4 different sub-dungeon rooms that are all connected by teleporters, or could all be connected by teleporters. They all have teleporters in them. I think they are connected. You have this side fog room, and then you have this teleporter that comes off of the lake area, which is where the only stairs into the dungeon are, and the teleporter is the only area to 15. If this teleporter were to send you to one of these side rooms, and then that one go to a different teleporter to another side room, to another side room, to another side room, and then finally to 15, I think that is a brilliant S tier design. As it stands, I think it just falls flat of that. I still really like it. Maybe I should put it in S tier because it's fair. You can get everywhere without necessarily using movement spells, I think. Maybe not everywhere, but you can get most places without using movement spells. I just really wish that it had gone the extra mile to do that. It would be really frustrating to get down to floor 15, but I think it's a more interesting way of setting up the dungeon to just be like, this is your final challenge before getting to the strongest monsters in the game. And then floor 15 is just kind of like there. It's cool, you walk in, you have this giant room with giant pillars for the stone tiles. It sections itself out into a couple different sections. Maybe it is A tier. You have the secret wall into the super secret wall, past the rotator secret wall with the Lemurian High Priestess. You want to just hunt around to these stud rooms to find all the strongest monsters in the game. I just think that, you know, maybe I will put it into S tier. It does a really good job of making it feel like it's a statement room. It's a statement map. Everything works really well with it. I think maybe there are a couple odd choices here, but if I'm giving S tier to floors 4 and 14, I think I should give it to 15, because 15 is just... they knew what they wanted and they made it happen. So yeah, I think in final review, this is my tier list for Mordor: The Depths of Dejenol maps. You have S tier, which are just the really great, well-designed maps that execute on an idea pretty solidly. There's no wasted space. It's just... it is what it is. Maybe because of that, I think floor 4 is like down to A tier. And then maybe out of these... yeah, these S tier maps have no wasted space in them. They execute on their ideas pretty well. There's a little bit of potential that could have been done that wasn't, but I really like them. A tier, you have maps that have a lot of potential, have some good ideas, but just fall a little bit flat due to some wasted space, due to just feeling a little bit... there's too much space in the 30 by 30 grid, and that they don't really fully use to their potential, or they're a little bit basic. B tier, you have maps that definitely don't use all their space to their full potential, but they still have some good points of interest, some interesting ideas, but they're a little bit messy. C tier, you have the maps that don't really feel like they went in with a purpose. They're just like, we'll throw some stuff together here. The points of interest are nice, but everything else is just kind of like, why? And because of that, I think that, yeah, floor 3 is a B tier, not a C tier. And then you have floor 8, which doesn't need to exist. Like, you could remove floor 8 from the game and no one would miss it. Why does floor 8 exist? Let me know in the comments down below why floor 8 exists. Let me know what you thought about going back to Mordor. Let me know what else you want to see me talk about Depths of Dejenol. I do want to talk about weapons in it. I think that weapon design in Mordor is a very interesting topic, but I wanted to get this video out of the way because someone asked me for it. Someone asked for a map tier list for Dejenol, and I wanted to provide that for them. So thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. This is Mythical Zenith signing out.